Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. This is another Herpanwo TV roving film review. I know you guys love them, so I'm doing another one. Yeah, in this film I will be reviewing the 2019 movie Joker. I'm just heading into Littlemore now. This is an area of Oxford I used to live in. I'm not going down the back alley this time because it's a bit too muddy, but I'm just going along the roads here. I'm going to the View Cinema this time, and it's actually only about 10 o'clock in the morning. The showing is actually 10:35. It's a nice early showing. I don't have any work today at all, because the one lady I was going to work for has cancelled me. As I said, you know, all my other clients are away at the moment, so I've got a day off. One of those rare things. I normally work every day. Well, weekends I'll do like 2-3 hours, but I very rarely have a full day off in my job. However, I'm a bit upset actually, and a bit worried, because the reason I've been cancelled today is because this dog I look after has got to go to the vets, and he might have cancer, and that's upset me. I mean, he's okay, you know. I mean, he's not sick, but he has a tumour, and he's got to have a biopsy today, and it might be cancerous. If it is, he's going to have another operation to get rid of it. But I don't know how it's going to go. I mean, he's only 7. He's not old. He's middle age for a doggy, and I'm upset about that. I mean, of course, I earn like £61 a week looking after him. But usually about £60-70 a week. But I'm also very fond of him. You know, it's like with dogs. They're like kids. You know, I know he's not my dog, but I've become very close to him, and I don't want to lose that. I'll be very upset if we lose him. I really will. So I've got that plaguing my mind at the moment. So where am I going today? Well, seeing as I've got a day off, I'm going to the early showing of the film. Thought I'd just get it over with, you know, because I was up and awake, and it's the time I normally go to work, so I saw there was a showing at 10:35. I thought I might as well go and see that. Now, the film I'm going to see is called Joker. Now, I wasn't originally going to go and watch this. I saw the trailer and didn't think it was worth watching. But then I'm kind of doing this kind of through popular request, because I've had loads and loads of people, well, actually not loads, about 4 people get in touch with me, write to me, and in fact someone else brought this up in the chat box of the Herpanwo show last night. Oh, Ben, you've got to go and see Joker. You've got to go and see it. You know, you'll love it. I mean, well, one person, funny enough, they said you got to, it's one of these weird things, that one person said I should go and watch it because it's so awful and I'll hate it, and the other person, everyone else says you could go and see it because it's so brilliant. Now, someone said, oh, you got to go and see it because you got to see it and really see how awful it is, because it's promoting cultural Marxism. It's demonising, you know, white straight men and things like this. And I want you to, you know, basically this person was egging me on to make a really scathing review video of this film, assuming that this is going to be a very scathing review video. Everyone else is saying, oh, Ben, it's a searing indictment of cultural Marxism. You know, this is a really kind of red-pilled movie, you know. And again, you know, which is it? I mean, I don't know which it is. I mean, films can be interpreted in different ways. And it's obvious that the division of opinion means the film appears to be pretty ambiguous in the way it's been received. And indeed, I've actually read some reviews. The only reason I read the reviews is because I didn't think I was going to go and see it. I mean, as you know, as I've said in previous roving reviews, I never read a review of a film until I have seen it. And the only reason I watched any or read any reviews of this movie was because I had planned not to go and see it. And, well, I think I saw that The Guardian absolutely hated it, and yes, I will be reading that review later. Fear not. And I will have an awful lot of fun. Hopefully they will they will let their poise slip and let their grip on sanity, on their untriggeredness slip the way they didn't over Douglas Murray's book. But I also watched like some alt media reviews of it. I watched Stephen Molyneux did a review, so did Paul Joseph Watson, and they really recommended it as really what the correspondent who said it's it's really anti-cultural Marxism. It's really like pro common sense, and how it's pro white people, pro men, saying how white people and men are not evil and things like that. Really pre-free speech, libertarian, all kinds of things like that. Molyneux actually said it was quite disturbing. He says it's a dark movie. We'll have to see. But anyway, the film itself is it's called Joker. The main character is played by Joaquin Phoenix, and the main character is the Joker. Now, who is the Joker? Well, the Joker is one of the principal antagonists of the Batman franchise. Now, everyone I think has heard of Batman. I mean, Batman was from the American comic culture. Now, I mean, comics, you see, I was into comics as a kid, but I mean, comics in Britain until quite recently meant Beano, Dandy, Topper, and things like that. And these are definitely child-orientated. They use very simple language. They are the plots are fairly childlike in nature, and the dialogue is all sort of aged 8 or above, aged 8 or below rather. Lots of them, like Beano, uses all capitalisation. They're clearly aimed for young children, comics. In fact, I grew out with them when I was probably about 11 years old. American comics, or should I say American style comics, because of course it's not just American. I mean, there have been American style comics are very different. They are far more mature. They're far more, at the risk of sounding snobbish, artistic than the British comics. The actual artwork is far more sophisticated. The plots and the storylines tend to have a more adult theme. They often involve things such as crime, science fiction, disasters, violence, things like that. The dialogue also tends to be more sort of young adult, sort of like what they call young adult fiction now. Of course, we're talking here Marvel, DC Comics. Batman comes from DC Comics. First began in 1939, and that's when the people were introduced to this character. And of course, we're talking here about an era before television, when these were the principal entertainment for like children and teenagers. These kinds of what you call graphic novels, I suppose, is the sophisticated way of saying them. But of course, American style comics are not confined to the United States. There are American style comics in Britain. There's like Eagle. Eagle was a very American type comic. It was actually had a revival in the 80s when I was a child, and I actually read it for a while. It was quite good. Eagle is most famous for its character Dan Dare. This is a British comic made in the American style. And so I hope you can hear me. I've got wind on the mic, but I've got the camera turned towards me. I know I get a better quality reception that way. The sound gain, you get better quality sound gain that way. Like I say, Batman was an instant hit. I mean, I was introduced to Batman by like most people of my generation through the 1960s TV series. Batman. Adam West was the guy who played Batman, who's most famous today for being in Family Guy. He's the mayor of Quahog playing himself. But it was Batman's unusual, I think, for comics in that. And there's a lot of noise here. I'm going to stop filming for a couple of minutes until I get past this guy with the clippers. All part of filming in a busy street. I avoid the main roads though when I'm making movies, so I don't get too much traffic noise if possible. You know, Bruce Wayne is the main character, who is the man behind Batman. Batman is his kind of alter ego. Like many like many comic heroes, he lives a double life. You see this with Superman, Spider-Man, etc. He lives a double life. One as an ordinary person, such as Clark Kent, the mild-mannered reporter, you know, and you know, when he's sort of off duty from his normal life, he becomes this other person, and he wears something to disguise him. In the case of Batman, it's a hood with a mask that covers half his face, and his costume, of course, was like a bat. He designated it like a bat. Now, unlike a lot of comic book heroes, he doesn't have any superhuman powers. He's an ordinary guy. I mean, his ability, unlike, say, Superman, of course, who can fly and has superhuman strength, Spider-Man, who can shoot webs from his hands, Batman has none of that. He's an ordinary man. What he does have is huge intellect. Bruce Wayne is a very successful man. He's a multi-millionaire. He's a genius, and he's an engineer. And his power comes from this ability. Also, he's trained in martial arts and unarmed combat. He decides to become a vigilante crime fighter when he was a child. His parents are killed by by violent criminals. So he decides to become a crime fighter, an amateur vigilante crime fighter. And so he develops this persona of Batman. And his power comes from, firstly, his fitness. He's a fit guy, and his martial arts abilities. Also his engineering knowledge. He can build gadgets. He has numerous gadgets which he carries on a bandolier around his waist. Things such as he has this boomerang-like weapon, and also a device which shoots a grappling hook, and he can rappel down walls or climb up. He can climb up the sides of skyscrapers in Gotham City, Gotham City is the fictional city where Batman lives. It's a bit windy now, and I'm going to raise my voice slightly so you can hear me when the wind gets up. Gotham City is modelled on large American cities such as New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, etc. But it's a fictional place. It doesn't exist. Apparently, the writers were looking for a name, and they were searching a map of Britain. They found a little village called Gotham in Nottinghamshire, and they decided to call their place Gotham City. That place is now famous, and Batman fans go there and things like that. So Bruce Wayne becomes this vigilante crime fighter, and he's later on joined. I mean, to begin with, he didn't have Robin, apparently. And you see this in the movies, in the movie series as well. But then later he's joined by a young man. He befriends a teenage boy, a young man, who joins him. So now he has a companion. I mean, he's always had a companion. He has a servant. And before Bruce Wayne became a crime fighter, he has a servant who was always stayed with the family called Alfred Pennyworth, who's a sort of elderly English guy. And Alfred is in the TV series as well, and he's the only person actually who knows Batman's secret. And because he's loyal to the family, he doesn't tell anyone. But later on, Robin comes along, a young man who's befriended by Bruce Wayne. And of course, the villains. I mean, there's a very imaginative array of villains, and most of them were introduced in the first couple of years of the comic series. Mr. Freeze, he has a physical deformity. Mr. Freeze can't experience any temperature above zero, so he has to wear a suit to keep himself cold all the time because of some accident in the laboratory. You see this with James Bond villains, actually. The bad guys often have some kind of physical deformity. And you also see this with Batman. There's other charismatic villains, such as the Penguin, who again has a long nose and he wears a tuxedo, so he looks like a penguin, hence his name. And again, they have these very charismatic attitudes, aspects of their personality and modus operandi. For example, they have special weapons. The Penguin has poison-tipped umbrellas. You know, Catwoman has a whip. Catwoman is a burglar, a cat burglar, hence her name, who dresses as a cat. And although she's a villain, she's also kind of Batman's love interest, and they have like an on-off kind of relationship. Very complicated thing. Again, this is the aspect of American comics you don't get in British style comics, because the element of the adult nature of some of the stories. And of course the Joker. The Joker is the most famous. He was one of the earliest of the villains. And the Joker is a guy who he had some kind of accident which was disfigured him, so he dresses as a clown. And I know him best as the Joker in the TV series, where he's played by a guy called Cesar Romero. And he has a quite light-hearted element. I remember he was quite light-hearted in that series. The whole series is actually quite light-hearted. The Joker in particular was kind of very clownish. I remember he's very rather funny, really. But in the original comic series, and indeed in the more recent adaptations, he's a much darker character. He's actually something of a psychopath. In fact, in that documentary Psychopath Night, which I reviewed for Panwo Voice, they have like a top 10 rundown of fictional psychopaths, and the winner was the Joker, as portrayed by Heath Ledger in the movies. I mean, the Batman has really taken off in recent years, thanks to the adaptations by Tim Burton and others, which are superb. The first Batman film was excellent, where Jack Nicholson plays the Joker, and the Joker's like an evil clown. He's like horrible. He has very just characteristic weapons such as poison, extra sharp playing cards with poison on them. He has like a handshake buzzer which kills, gives an electric shock which kills. Doesn't explain how the person wearing it doesn't get the shock as well, but things like that. So he's like has clown-like weapons, which are sort of tailor-made for his persona. So, in a sense, they're almost like anti-Batman, because the bad guys all have their own kind of persona, which covers their own identity, which has a theme. Penguin, the Catwoman, the Joker, the Riddler, of course, things like that. I mean, the exception being Mr. Freeze, who has this physical deformity, which is where his characteristic nature comes from. So I'm going to go and see this film. Now, this film is called Joker. It's basically centred on the Joker. It's set in the Batman universe in Gotham City, but it centres on his backstory, on basically how he became who he is. And by who he is, meaning the dark, evil Joker of the early comics and the later film adaptations, rather than the TV series. And everyone's, like I say, people are talking about this movie. They say, Ben, go and see it, go and see it. Well, request granted. I'm going to go and watch the movie, and I'll let you know what I think. Apparently there's, if I don't get shot, because apparently some people have threatened to enter the auditoriums where Batman has been shown, and with guns and shoot the place. Hasn't happened yet in the United States. If it hasn't happened there, it probably won't happen over here. So I'm not that worried, but nevertheless, if I don't come out and someone finds this footage, tell everyone I love them. And here I am, I'm getting close to the cinema now. There is Oxford United's Kassam Stadium, the big horseshoe-shaped ground, which Ellis Taylor has talked a lot about. The big horseshoe. It's right near the Michael and Mary line. And the cinema's over there, you probably know the rest. So I'm looking forward to this, interesting. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, maybe I'll talk more about the reviews later, but I've watched the reviews by Paul Joseph Watson and Molyneux. PJW thinks it's great. He goes along with a lot of the people who've written to me and said, Ben, it's so anti-globalist, it's so anti-cultural Marxist, it's wonderful. You know, to see a mainstream movie that's speaking out against these things and standing up for the poor white guys for a change, you know. I won't know until I've seen it, because someone else wrote to me, like I said, and told me, Ben, go and see it, but it's horrible for you. You need to like tear this to pieces, because it's so laced with horrible globalist propaganda, and it says how evil white people are and things like this. You know, the usual thing. Well, time will tell. I'll know when I've watched it, obviously. So here I am at the View Cinema in Oxford, and I shall see you when I get out. Okay, I'm out. Out of a different door, I think. I've come out of a different door, so I'll just go around. That's not the door I went in, is it? Oh, anyway. That was horrible. Yeah, it really was. That was a disturbing film. Yeah, I've got some notes. I made me notes. Get me notes. Can't ever write very well in there because I'm just all. Yeah, there's 15 certificate. It's funny that they're like changing. Oh, here we go. This is the well, that one I came in and I went out a different door. So I know where I am now. They changed the certificates on things, I've noticed. Like you get the DVD of The Shining now. That was an 18 certificate originally. Now it's a 15. And Watership Down, it used to be PG, it's now at U. They're sort of like lowering the. It's almost like they're lowering the certificates, making things more acceptable to younger viewers. But that was a 15 certificate film, and I'm astonished because it's pretty violent and it's pretty horrible, very grim. It's a sort of filming noir, like all the Batman films are, from Tim Burton's original onwards. This actually is the first Batman film. I mean, you do see Batman, but it's only very briefly. You see the Bruce Wayne as a child. He's a kid of about 9 or 10, because this is a prequel. This is a backstory of the Joker, and you find out there is some interaction. I don't want to put in spoilers. I'm going to have to put in some spoilers, but there is some interaction between the young Joker and the young Batman. Early, before the actual main stories begin, when they're both adult, you realise. I mean, the film. I'm going to have to include some spoilers. The film includes the death story of Thomas Wayne, the father, and his mother and his wife. So Bruce Wayne witnesses the murder of his. As I was saying earlier, the part of the backstory, the reason Bruce Wayne became Batman in the first place, is because he witnesses the murder of his parents, and he resolves to become a private crime fighter as a result when he grew up. But it's not the Joker that killed. At first, I thought the Joker was going to be one that killed the Wayne's mum and dad. It wasn't, someone else. But it was in and indirectly, because it's caused by something that the Joker did. Now, anyway, the Joker is a guy called Arthur. He's a young man called Arthur originally, before he became the Joker, and he's working as a clown in various comedy routines, all kinds of sort of cheap showbiz hire, children's parties. He does a comedy routine at the children's ward at the local hospital, things like that. He gets into trouble, actually. He loses his job eventually because he has a gun, and he drops the gun while he's trying to entertain the children. And he loses his job as a result of that. But the first scene has him sitting in front of the mirror putting his makeup on, and it's all the Joker, played by Joaquin Phoenix, Arthur, this young man. I mean, I'm sure Phoenix will get an Oscar or a Golden Globe for that, because he's such a good actor. You can see actually he's very thin. I believe he's probably maybe starved himself to play that role, as some actors do. They either make themselves very thin or make themselves they put on weight or lose weight to play a particular role. Such as Renée Zellweger, who put on about 10 pounds in order to play Bridget Jones, and Robert De Niro, who did the same to play the guy in Raging Bull. Robert De Niro is actually in this film. He plays a guy called Murray Franklin, a TV talk show comedian. He does the American style where he's sitting on a desk and there's a guy on the chair beside him, you know, Jimmy Kimmel, that kind of style. And it's interesting that Robert De Niro's in it because the film this really reminds me of very much is Taxi Driver. Have you seen The Taxi Driver, where Robert De Niro plays the leading role as a man on the verge of a mental breakdown? And of course, if you watch Taxi Driver, you'll know that he's saved from complete madness by compassion. Compassion for a teenage prostitute and a runaway girl who's working as a teenage prostitute. His compassion for her saved him from a complete emotional and psychological meltdown. In the case of Arthur, he has no such salvation. The whole thing with makeup and false faces, it's all about false people, personas. And that's an important theme running through the film, this idea of the fakeness covering up the reality of people's personalities. I mean, there's this movement. I mean, Arthur starts a movement of clown. And like, I'll come to that in a minute. But anyway, you find out that he's a psychiatric patient. He's had a mental breakdown. He's been in hospital. He's taken medication. He's having counselling He goes every evening to have counselling, once a week, I think, to have counselling in this seedy little office and social services, and that gets cancelled because of budget restraints and things like that. He has he lives with his mother. Bit of a cliche, that, isn't it? There's a horrible smell here. This river, it looks really kind of like it looks clean, doesn't it? But God, you could smell like sewage or something. It smells like sewage.
It is the sewage.
Yeah, man. It just smells, man. It used not to. I mean, there's a while when it didn't. Now it's started again. But yeah, he's a psychiatric patient, and he lives with his mother, who is almost as crazy as he is. She herself is mad. He doesn't know who his father is. Well, there's a bit of intrigue around that because, well, you see, his mother used to work for the Wayne family. That's Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's father. She worked for him, and she's always writing to him. She's always sending him letters, and she got it into her head, that Arthur is his son. That she had an affair with her employer, and Arthur was their son. Now, I told you there's going to be spoilers here, so I did warn you. So if you're still watching, I assume you don't mind me giving you spoilers. Now, Bruce Wayne's this little boy. At one point, when Arthur discovers this, he has like this absent father, and so he's living alone with his mother. And of course, again, you have the breakup of families, which is a theme I think which maybe the other critics I've quoted picked up on. So he's a loner, living alone. He's a very solitary man who is living with his mother, who's nuts. He's basically her carer. He even has to give her baths and things like that. But he has these fantasies about being a great star. He has these fantasies about being on the Murray Franklin show. When he's in the audience and Murray calls him down to the stage, and Robert De Niro's character calls him down and pats him on the head and says how wonderful he is, and it says he'd love to have a son like him. It's really sad, actually. I couldn't help feeling sorry for the poor man, Arthur. This whole film is an exploration of mental illness. It really is a bit too vivid, perhaps, for my stomach to take. There's this. Again and again, this comes back to the same shot where he's on this flight of steps and he's dancing, and in the end he's dressed in his Joker outfit and he's dancing, and it's like the Exorcist steps. I think maybe it's even the same flight of steps. I don't know. they filmed it out that it's like The Exorcist. There's a big flight of steps, and it's really it's interesting that you think he finds a girlfriend at one point. He gets into the lift. This is another hark back to the taxi driver, because he gets into the lift with this woman he knows, and this woman lives along it's one of his neighbours. She's a single mother who lives along the corridor. They live in this rather seedy block of flats, him and his mum, in Gotham City. And this woman lives along the corridor with her little daughter, and they get into the lift once, and she does something very strange. She puts her hands up to her head like that, and she might, as if to make her hands look like a pistol, and she mimes shooting herself. She goes, and that, of course, is straight out the Taxi Driver, because that is what Travis Bickle, Robert De Niro's character, does. When he goes on his mad rampage to try and rescue this girl, he does that as if he'd originally been planning to shoot himself at the end, but ran out of ammunition or something like that. And you see several love scenes with them together, Arthur and this woman. And she accompanies, when his mum gets sick and goes to hospital, she accompanies him. She goes with him and watches his comedy routines, because he does a couple of stand-up acts and things like that. But then you see it's pretty awful, because there's another scene. I mean, it's a bit confusing at first, because I think it's made clear later on that he's fantasizing about a relationship with her, because he breaks into her flat and she goes in. She goes, Arthur, what are you doing here? Arthur, this is not your home. Please go. And things like that. Like she hardly knows him. Like any neighbour you have a brief acquaintance with would do if you broke into their flat. Yeah, earlier on, you see him at a door. She opens it and they start passionately kissing. So it's a fantasy that he has a relationship with this woman. And then there's this. Now there's a. I can't read my writing because I was writing in the dark. The setting is this city, Gotham City, which I say is based on a large city in the United States, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and it's in the midst of economic and social collapse. There's a dustman strike, and there's bags of rubbish everywhere. It's all over the place, and this leads to widespread rioting. And the Joker, he becomes like a folk hero, because what he does is he's on the underground train, and again you see these cliches of urban decay, which is like, for example, you see graffiti daubed on the side of the underground trains, and that again is, you see that in the Equalizer and things like that. It's a sign of like high crime, no jobs, poverty, things like that, urban social deprivation. And there's a scene on the train. He gets onto the train one day, and dressed in his clown suit, and he has, because of his mental problems, someone just bursts out laughing for no reason, like he's been taking weed or something. But it's part of his mental problems. And he's laughing, sitting on this train laughing, and it's a scene very like Jacob's Ladder, because the lights keep flashing on the train and it keeps going dark, and there's these bunch of like posh thugs on the train, the type I mean, champagne louts, and they start picking on him, and then they attack him because he's laughing. They think he's laughing at them, and they say, "Oh, so fucking funny," It's like I say, this is where the violence is his first it's kind of an initiation, because he's got this gun which this guy at the clown centre gave him. It turns out like this guy's a bit of a jerk and reported him afterwards and things like that. But he's got a gun this guy gave him, and he kills these guys. He shoots them dead, all three of them. And it turns out that they are stockbrokers working for the Wayne family brokerage firm. So he works for like Thomas Wayne Holdings in Wall Street, or whatever the equivalent of Wall Street is in Gotham City. And this sparks like riots because the people there's very much a class war. The poor people of the city blame the rich for their problems, and so this guy, so without meaning to, Arthur becomes a kind of Robin Hood-like figure, and it's really it's very dramatic because it's kind of like it is an initiation ritual. It's like a baptism of fire and blood. He stumbles off into a public toilet covered in blood with his smoking gun in his hand, and he does his little dance. It almost looks like it's been like his initiation into the world of killing. Yeah. So he's right. I mean, you get this from time to time. In the Great Depression, there was John Dillinger, the public enemy number one, as they called him. He became like, because he was like a criminal by standards, by normal standards in happier times. He'd be called a criminal. He and his gang used to go around robbing banks and things like that. Yeah, people loved him. People thought he was like their hero. There's still like a John Dillinger die for you society. I thought that was an invention of the Illuminatus trilogy, Robert Shane, Robert Anton Wilson, but it actually exists. There is a John Dillinger die for you society. And then there's this incredible situation where he believes his mother keeps writing letters, like I said, about Arthur being the son of Thomas Wayne. And he turns up at the Wayne mansion and he sees little Bruce, Batman to be, playing in the garden. He goes up and he shows him some magic tricks, and because of course this would be his half brother. And then Alfred comes out and tells him to go away, and he demands to see Bruce Wayne. Alfred says, "No, sorry, but you're not his son, because your mother was crazy. She made it up." And then later on he confronts Thomas Wayne at the opera. He goes to the opera where there's all these posh blokes, and Wayne's there with his family, and he confronts Wayne in the toilets and says, "You know, I'm your father, can't you hug me?" It's heart-rending, really. He says, "Can't you just be a bit kind to your own son? Can't you just hug me?" And of course he's never had a father, this guy. And then Wayne says, "Look, I'm sorry, your mother was crazy." He repeats the story. "Your mother was crazy, I had to sack her. I never had an affair with her. You're not my son. What's more, she adopted you." And this is a shock for him. He later finds out that he was an abandoned baby. His own parents left him in a shopping bag at a petrol station or something, and that he's like just been abandoned, and she adopted him. And it's pretty awful because This is probably the worst bit for me. It turns out that her mother was committed to the Arkham Hospital. That's the Arkham State Hospital. That's the psychiatric ward in the Batman universe, because she was neglecting little Arthur, and not only neglecting, but she allowed her boyfriends to abuse him, and they found him tied to a radiator covered in bruises. This is reminiscent of, well, firstly Marilyn Monroe, of course, famously had a mother who did that, who brought in lots of boyfriends who used to physically and sexually abuse her when she was a little kid, which is why she was never quite right, my Marilyn Monroe, poor girl. But it's also somewhat, I don't know how much I want to say right now, but it's similar to my own life. because my parents were not abusive to me, but they were passively abusive because they allowed other people to abuse me. They allowed people who were their closest friends come into the house, and these people were abusive to me. And I've made other videos about this, but one of them in particular was, well, one of them was, they were very deeply emotionally abusive, not sexually. One was physically abusive to me, and again with my parents gave him permission to be physically abusive. And another was not only emotionally, as an old woman who was not only emotionally abusive to me, but she programmed my mother as well and hypnotised my mother and brainwashed her into being emotionally abusive to me. So I've made other videos about that. I don't want to go into too much detail, but you see, this is why I found it it cut a bit too close to the quick for my own family history. Do you know what I mean? So it echoed with me personally, very, very much. I mean, there's a sort of, because it's partly that there's not an element that, in a sense, that he is kind of like a. I'm trying to read my notes. Sorry, my notes are in a terrible state. Writing in darkness is not easy. That he is essentially a lost soul. When he in the final climactic scene, where he shoots dead. He's been invited onto Murray Franklin's show, and he kills him with a gun, shoots him dead on air, live on TV. And he said something very interesting. He says, I'm a damaged, mentally ill person. It's the first time he used the term mental illness to refer to himself, who society just treats like trash and doesn't care about. And he said, you'd step up, after he shoots Franklin, he says, if that was me lying there dead, you'd just step over me. And isn't that true? Isn't that the case? And there's a horrible, very symbolic incident where his mother's died. I mean, he kills his mother. He actually kills his mother. He murders his mother by smothering her with a pillow while she's lying in a hospital bed. And that's slightly reminiscent of Gladiator, because the character Commodus, who is played by the same actor, Joaquin Phoenix, kills his own father the same way, smothers him to death. Joaquin Phoenix seemed to be good at playing these people, these sort of rather slightly effeminate, very feeble and confused and emotionally damaged young men. He's good at playing those kinds of characters. As I said, he'll probably get an Oscar or Golden Globe for this. But when he sees the police are outside asking him questions, and he tries to get away from them, and he goes into the hospital and says, I'll answer your questions later, and he can't get in through the sliding door. It's like an automatic sliding door, like you get at hospitals, that detects you when you arrive, either by putting pressure on a mat on the floor, or there's an optical detector that can sense the light change, which opens. He sort of like stands in front of the door, it doesn't open, and he waves his hand in front of and he waves his hand in front of it to try and get it to open. It doesn't. Won't open for him, and it's like he doesn't exist. It's like he doesn't exist. And that's how he's completely alone. And even the world around him doesn't even recognise his presence. Even automatic doors won't open for him. That's how non-existent he is. That's how much of a non-entity he is. It's a very... it's a chilling scene. It's a chilling scene when that happens. It's like in The Simpsons, that happens. It's done humorously in the Simpsons cartoon series where Bart, apparently, Bart thinks he's lost his soul or something, and he sells his soul to Milhouse or something for $5 or something, and the same thing happens. He can't go through a sliding door. It's like he doesn't exist. Where are we now? And then there's like I said, there's this brutal second murder, and then he's dancing on the Exorcist steps again. And funnily enough, you hear this you hear this music in the background, and I thought, oh my god, it's Gary Glitter, and it is. You hear Gary Glitter, a song by Gary Glitter playing in the background. Now, I knew this was a bit of a problem because there's been a bit of a scandal in the media because he actually has been paid royalties by the film producers for using that song in the movie. And of course he's a nonce, isn't he? He's a filthy paedophile. So why is he so it makes you think, well, why is that happening? And so it's a really horrible. It's not light viewing, this film. It's grim. It is unsettling, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. A lot of you won't like this. A lot of you, because he does some more murder. He kills the guy who. So the guys turn up at his house after his mum dies, and they don't realise he's murdered her, and they're going to comfort him with a bottle of scotch, you know, the way guys do. He and the two clowns. There's this. The guy gave him the gun, this rather obnoxious one. There's this little short midget one. He's like a little dwarf entertainer, and they turn up, and he brutally murders the guy, the big guy, to the shock and consternation of the little small dwarf guy. And then he lets the dwarf guy escape. He says, "You're the only one who was ever kind to me," he says, and he lets the little dwarf guy escape. But it's darkly humorous, like he's like in the middle of killing this guy with a pair of scissors. He's basically stabs him in the face and the eye and the neck with a pair of scissors, and then it's blood everywhere. It's very, let's say it's a 15 certificate. I was surprised. And then right, just cross over this road. Here we go. And at the same time, there's like the little guy can't get out because he can't reach the door chain. The little midget, he can't get out. And so this is Arthur. Can you open the door for me? And he says, "Oh, sorry, yeah, sure." And he's talking so normally while he's doing this brutal murder, and there's blood everywhere, and Arthur's covered in this blood. Yet he's acting so normally. And he's like, they're lying in there. He's lying inside his body, just killed him. And he says, "Hey, guy," he said to his little short guy, he says, "Do you watch the Murray Franklin show? I'm on it tonight. Check it out." And he's quite. So he's become quite. As I said, this is a sign that he can carry out these murders, and he just acts normally around them. So he's become psychopathic. He's rather like. Have you ever seen a film called California? California is spelt with a K. It's got Brad Pitt in it, playing this psychopath. And he's exactly the same. He'll flick from brutally eviscerating someone with like a dagger. The next moment he's just acting normally. That's what psychopaths are like. I've known psychopaths. Like I said, these people who my parents allowed into our lives. As I said, it's a film about a man being emotionally and mentally destroyed and being psychologically broken down by his own past, by his own life, and by society. It's a dark, dismal film. It's depressing. I don't mind telling you. There's no happy ending to it. I mean, it ends basically with him, you know, being lauded. Just after the Waynes have been killed, which the Joker doesn't do, but he's killed this guy on TV. He's killed Murray Franklin on TV. That's what makes him a hero. And he's freed from a police car after he's arrested. And the crowd's all wearing clown masks. It's a kind of symbol. It's rather like the yellow vests. They've got these clown masks because of the first killing on the underground where he kills these three bankers. And they sort of like they're cheering him on, Joker, Joker, Joker. Because by then he's using the sobriquet Joker. He makes Murray Franklin introduce him on the show as the Joker. And that's him. He's now. That's the backstory. That's how you know how the Joker became the Joker. And of course, the rest is history. They grow up, Batman grows up, and even though they're not actually half-brothers, according to, I mean, he finds out from records eventually that they're not half-brothers, but they become arch-enemies. Now, in response to the people who wrote to me, urging me to go and see this film, because some of you were saying it promotes demonisation of white people and young solitary men. It's culturally Marxist. It's cultural Marxist propaganda. It's designed to kind of like make everyone hate us and things like this. I don't think that's the case. At the same time, the people who say it, a lot of people, including Stephen Molyneux, Paul Joseph Watson, a lot of this kind of like the intellectual dark web, have been making a big fuss about this movie, saying it's so good. It's like it completely diffuses and exposes cultural Marxism. It reveals the real truth about it, what it's like to be, you know, a white man in modern society, where everyone hates you and everyone calls you evil. I didn't detect that either. And this is funny that, because a lot of people do this. Like, do you remember my review of Black Panther? I might put a link in the description box. If I don't, you can find it. I'll certainly put a link to my last. What was the last film I reviewed? I think it was The Current War. This one's the Black Panther I did last year sometime, and people are going to see it saying, "Ben, you've got to see that. It's loaded with cultural Marxist propaganda. It's all about how evil white people were, and the only good that's ever come in the world has come from black people and things like this." I went to see it, and I couldn't agree. And believe me, I looked for it. I went into the cinema to watch Black Panther expecting to see cultural Marxist propaganda. I was on my guard against it. I was ready for it. And I didn't see any, or very little, very, very little. I actually thought Black Panther was a pretty good movie. I thought it was pretty good. I think politically it was fairly neutral, actually. And I have to say the same for this. I don't see either pro or anti-cultural Marxist propaganda in this film. I think it's a tragic, heartrending and shocking, horrifying story about a man who suffers a mental breakdown. The Joker. The Joker is a damaged young man who becomes the Joker. He becomes this criminal mastermind as a result of his background. I think that's all you can say. That is really the plot of the film is actually very simple, and I don't think it's meant to tell us anything more than that. I don't think it's meant to influence us politically in any way. Anyway, time for the reviews. Let's see what the critics have to say. Right then, let's go to the reviews, and we're going to start, as always, as per her Panwo TV tradition, with your favourite and my favourite, the Triggered Crusaders themselves, the Garidian. As always, I'm going to be speaking in my Guardian voice, not just to lampoon the Guardian itself, but so that you know when I'm speaking and when I'm actually reading from the review. So this is a review by Peter Bradshaw, who, by the look of things, is a white male! He's a white male! He's a white male! Anyway, his review is entitled Joker Review, the most disappointing review of the year. Why so serious? Todd Phillips' solemn but shallow Supervision Origins movie has a strong performance by Joaquin Phoenix, but is weighed down by realist detail and tedious material. Oh, really? Well, I agree with him about the strong performance by Phoenix, definitely. But, and Supervillain Origins, now, there's several of these. I mean, as I've always said, comic book adaptations to film are not generally very good. Apart from, I'd say, the first Spider-Man movie, of course the early Superman series, you could say, were pretty good. Generally, they're pretty poor. I only used to go see them at the cinema because when my daughter was a little girl, she used to want to go and see them. I used to go with her to keep her company, but I never really liked them.
This is different, but whether it can be classified as that, it is a comic book movie technically, because it is it's based on it's within a franchise and set in a universe created for a comic book, Batman. But it's so different in style. I mean, some critics, I'm not going to read them out, but some critics are actually saying it shouldn't be classified as that. The year's biggest disappointment has arrived. Well, how do you know? You see, it was the biggest disappointment before it arrived. Did you know that? Well, you made your mind up beforehand, Mr. White Male? It emerges with weirdly grown-up self-importance from the tulip fever of festival award seasons as an upscale spin on an established pop culture brand. I suppose that's true. I mean, I don't know about the weirdly grown-up self-importance. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Anyway, this is a new origin myth for Batman's most famous supervillain opponent. Joaquin Phoenix plays Arthur Fleck, a pathetic loser and loner in Gotham City. Arthur is a former inpatient at the psychiatric facility, blah blah blah, now allowed to live with his elderly mother, has a crush on his single mum neighbour, pines to be a comedian hero, worshipping blah blah, but he can only get a job as a clown in a grinning makeup and floppy-toed shoes, twirling an advertising banner outside a store where he's bullied and beaten up by young thugs passing by. One day, after the humiliation and despair become too much to bear, Arthur gets hold of a gun and discovers that his talent is not for comedy but violence. I think, that I'll say a bit more about this later on, but that is the prime message of the film. That, in a sense, the bullying culture, especially blaming the bully, when you say, well, it's their fault, it's their fault for being bullied, it's an ethical equation that everyone understands. I mean, in school, I used to have kids beating the shit out of me, and they would say in all kindness, look, we're trying to do you a favour, Ben, by teaching you to stand up for yourself. And it was a sense that I was the one to blame. It's all very, very mainstream now. Yet, in a sense, that idea is satirised in this film, which is, I think, maybe the prime message of it. And I'll say a bit more about that later on. But he does. I mean, eventually he cracks from all this, and that's where it all starts off. There is great production design by Mark Friedberg, some tremendous period cityscape images by cinematographer Lawrence Sher. That's true actually. The cityscape thing. Now there's a lot of wide shots of Gotham City. Now Gotham City is of course an imaginary city. It's based on as I said, a large American city, typical large American city. However, it's not. It's as an imaginary place. It is different, and indeed, the cityscape images a lot of them are CGI'd. Some of them are real shots of real cities. Other than there's a large-scale CGI shot where you see a train going through on a long straight track through a city. Gotham City does, despite its realism, it has a surreal tinge to it. It always has done, ever since the 60s TV series. Now, it's a little bit, and I mean the Tim Burton era and the movies, including this one. It has a real dash of China Miéville and Blade Runner, definitely. Gotham City. It's really, you could tell immediately it's not a real place. It's not a place within our world. It's an imaginary place. A strong performance by Joaquin Phoenix, though not his best. I don't know. I've only seen. I don't know how many films have I seen. Gladiator, The Signs, just a handful. So I can't compare it apart from those. I think it's the best one of any film I've seen him in. The film holds your attention up until Joker's terrible revenge bloodbath on the subway early on. Actually, what happens on the underground train is actually self-defense. I mean, it starts off as self-defense, and then he gets. I mean, it's a funny thing is when this sort of thing happens, very often the person who has been attacked will continue shooting, and of course, then you could say could lead to a manslaughter charge. But then you could always come up with the plea of extreme provocation. But no, it wasn't a revenge bloodbath. I mean, he was attacked by these three champagne louts, like I said, these three bankers, and he shoots them, and they, two of them run away, and he kills them. He chases after them and kills them because he's. So you could call that revenge, but I'd say extreme provocation, which is not the same as cold-blooded revenge. After this, the film loses your interest. No, Mr. White Male, it loses your interest. Speak for yourself. It didn't lose mine. Loses interest with tedious forced material about Joker's supposed triggering of an anti-capitalist, anti-rich movement with protesters dressed as clowns. I don't think that's forced. I think it's actually very interesting that happened. It's a neat idea. They put it in there, and of course this is essentially, it explains his father, Thomas Wayne, and his wife. They're shot dead by the rioters. They're both shot dead, and they steal the pearl necklace from Mrs. Wayne's neck when she's lying dead. This is a perfect way of inserting that story element, which we know about from the very beginning of the franchise, when the first comic book came out in 1939, that Bruce Wayne was inspired by witnessing his parents' murder to become Batman. So this explains the death of his parents. It also explains, you see the first time Bruce Wayne standing over the corpses of his parents and realising that he has to become Batman, and that's where he first gets the inspiration, or if you call it that, such a horrible traumatic experience. But no, I think that's unfair. It's not tedious, it's not forced. I think it's very neat. I mean, if they hadn't put, I suppose I was expecting Arthur the Joker to kill the Waynes, but he didn't. I mean, when I was expecting him to do it when he confronts Mr. Wayne in the toilet. I mean, it's quite funny because they're in these posh toilets at the Opera House, and everyone's in, like, all the guys are in tuxedos, and Wayne is wearing this smart tuxedo, and Arthur approaches him and says he's his son. He's this scruffy, skinny guy in jeans, and of course, like all mentally ill people, he doesn't take care of himself. He's dirty, he's dishevelled, his clothes are unlaundered, his hair is uncut and unwashed, and it's an interesting contrast. But anyway, the point. I expected him to pull a gun and shoot him then, but obviously it wasn't the Joker who killed the Waynes. Joker's own criminal and serial killer career bafflingly fizzles. No, bafflingly fizzles? No. Joker's never been a serial killer. Joker was essentially an organised crime. He was like a techno crime expert. I mean, Joker's always been like a master. He calls himself a supervillain, to quote the Batman franchise used the term supervillain. Now, they're not serial killers. They're not those kinds of criminals. They are more like organised crime people. The Penguin is like a mafia boss. The Riddler is kind of this really kind of like a surreal, self-deprecating kind of person who leaves clues about where he goes. He's more like a criminal artist type person, and it's all about money making. The film makes reference to movies from around the drama's era, such as Death Wish films, The French Connection, maybe even Star Wars. Now, according to this, according to the reviews, it's supposed to be set in the early 1980s. And I suppose if you look at the props, like you could say that. But again, you can't really. I don't think you could put a time period on Batman because it is in an imaginary world, in an imaginary place, which, as I said, has this distinct shade of surrealism. Putting an era on it, I think, is a mistake. So, I mean, I never thought of it as like being set in the early 80s. I didn't see the connection with the Death Wish thing. I didn't see that, no. And of course, he mentions the taxi driver. Scorsese's the taxi driver with Robert De Niro, and I noticed that. I mean, it was pretty obvious, especially the shooting miming of shooting their own head, which his imaginary girlfriend does, and also he does. Yeah. Only not as good. Oh, well, I haven't seen the Taxi Driver for years, but I thought it was excellent. I mean, I don't know if I could compare it to Joker. Both are very violent, and both are very upsetting. But I think that, as I said earlier, Taxi Driver is more optimistic. Taxi Driver essentially ends happily. Although, I mean, there's different interpretations of the ending. For me, it's very obvious that Travis Bickle, the taxi driver himself, Robert De Niro's character, is pulled back from the brink of complete breakdown by his compassion for this young girl, Jodie Foster's character, the teenage prostitute. With Joker, it's nothing like that. Joker ends as gloomily as it starts. The connection is signalled by the casting of De Niro himself. Well, I thought it was the gun mine, but yeah, I don't know if that is a connection, but it is nonetheless unearned and pedantic. What? Unearned and pedantic? What do you mean, unearned and pedantic? I mean, pedantic means pedantic means too close to the rule book and bureaucratic, so to speak, and being too literal with interpretations of various regulations. Unearned? What do you mean by that? Maybe Robert De Niro's the guy who did best in the auditions. I personally think he was very good as this sleazy TV host. So I'm not sure what he means then, Mr. White Male. Oh, man, this evil white male. By the way, don't work for the Guardian, mate, because they hate you. Now, where we go? Right. The whole idea of the malign clown should be very relevant. Well, the evil clown is actually a very, very common. Is a common motif. It's a very common archetype in movies, from Pennywise in It to there's various other examples I could give. The evil clown is actually almost more common now than the funny clown. I mean, the funny, in a sense, the Joker from the 60s TV series, Cesar Ramirez Joker, was very much the funny clown. But the evil clown is more common now. In fact, do you remember the clown outbreak? I actually wrote about this on her Panmo Voice, the outbreak of clowns that kept appearing everywhere. It coined the phrase coulrophobia, which means a fear of clowns, because people are actually frightened of these clowns. Anyway, we live in an era of trolling, incels, and internet bullying. Yes, we do. I have a full experience of that. Now, trolling and internet bullying I know about. Incels, now this is a word that didn't exist until about a year ago. It stands for involuntary celibate. It's actually an internet movement which is kind of related to the MGTOW movement, men going their own way, and the men's rights movement, adroitly. But incels are a group of people. Involuntary celibacy means that they are guys, mostly young guys, who want girlfriends and can't get them. And some shootings and other violent attacks in the last couple of years have been presumably as a result of incels who are striking out about being incels. It's sad because most people are not satisfied with their sex lives. I mean, including people in relationships, and there's more single people today now than ever before. So, in a sense, I could describe myself as an incel, although I don't make a big deal out of it. I don't victimize myself over it. But involuntary celibacy, I'm afraid, is the lot in life for most people. But I think they're referring here to the internet movement of incels. It's very grim. If you ever go to the incels website, I did a video about this. Do you remember my letter to Eric, when Eric wrote to me and I replied? The guy who wrote to me, the guy full of teenage angst, who wrote to me. I did a couple of videos about it, my nice guy videos, and it was really depressing. It was a depressing set of videos to make, actually, because, and you go to the incel website, they have these things they call what they have is they have these the opposite of an incel is a Chad. A Chad is a man who does have a girlfriend, and finds it easy to find girlfriends because he's more attractive usually. Which again is you can't victimize someone for being more attractive. But there's this word Stacey. Stacey's are women who date Chads. And they got a name for them, calling them Stacey's. It's horrible because they hate the Chads and the Stacey's, and it's almost as if these people are doing something wrong, and they're committing some kind of crime against the incels. It's horrible. I mean, I'm going to do an entire MGTOW video. I know I keep talking about it, but I will do kind of MGTOW videos soon. because people keep asking me if I'm a MGTOW, and I've decided to do a reply video to that. But I won't go any more into that because I'll go off topic too much. But anyway, this white male continues. The grisly Milo Yiannopoulos described himself as a supervillain. Hang on, Milo Yiannopoulos is grisly. You see, I know the Garidian are against him. They have to be, don't they? Because he's an MRA, and but he's, I don't know what he is now. But he did call himself a supervillain, but then he did it in a humorous way. Grisly? He's not grisly. There's nothing wrong and everything's right with engaging with all of this, and the copycat row is a red hair. Hang on, what's going on? Hang on. But perhaps because online aggression is difficult to dramatise, Phillips understandably wanted his film to be set in the pre-web age. It's true there is no internet in this film. As I say, I don't believe it's correct to set this film in any era of our world because it is in this rather surreal other world. But there is no internet present there. And he says, "Oh, this is really unfair. This bit." He says, "Yet he cheats an anachronistic quasi-YouTube movement into the story, when the video of Arthur's catastrophic attempt at stand-up somehow emerges." Hang on, that happens, yeah, because I was explaining how there's a video of him where he completely blows his stand-up routine, and that's how he gets onto the Franklin show, because apparently people like it. A video emerges which gets onto the Franklin show, the Murray Franklin show, Robert De Niro's character, and that's how he gets on there. But people like the video, you see. But he sees what I think the point is. I think this reviewer is now being pedantic because he's saying because that wouldn't happen in the years, in the time before YouTube, wouldn't it? It's quite possible that someone would have filmed it. I mean, you had like portable cameras in those days, as they say, which is sort of similar to the setting of the story, and it's quite likely someone might film it and then decide to send it into TV studios and see what they think. This thing did used to happen before the internet. I mean, the thing is, Jeremy Beadle. Do you remember the Jeremy Beadle "You've Been Framed" type thing? That predated the internet. So I don't know. I think this white male is being what's his name, Bradshaw, whatever his name is being unfair here. This Joker's genesis is determinedly mature and uncartoony. Well, that's what I like about it. When I was saying I don't like comic book adaptations, and yes, it is mature. It is not very different in style to other comic adaptations, including others in the Batman franchise. Compared to, say, Jack Nicholson's low-level crook, yeah, there's a backstory to the Jack Nicholson's Joker. He's this guy who he ends up with disfigurement, which is exactly what happened in the original comic, which is how he ends up wearing makeup and things like that. But I do think there's a difference between Jack Nicholson's Joker and Joaquin Phoenix's, definitely. And of course there's a different background, but the Joker character is never intended to be all the same when it's played by different actors. In the same way that the Batman character is not the same every time. You know, Michael Keaton's Batman in the original Tim Burton movie was nothing like Adam West and his Bruce Wayne. Nothing like him. There is no reason why Phoenix's elaborately backstory Joker shouldn't be as powerful as Heath Ledger's mysterious, motiveless, originalist Joker in The Dark Knight. Well, Heath Ledger's, that was good, actually. Like I said, he plays this vicious, like I say, #1 psychopath in The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger. And there's no background to how he became the Joker. He's still a very good character. But it was as powerful, I think. I think it was. Phoenix was as powerful as that. But at some stage, the comic book world of supervillain has to be entered. Well, it did at the end. The whole point is the Joker was created by this entire experience, and the bloody phone's ringing now. One moment. It's a bloody wrong number. I'll tell you, I'm going to make sure the other guy, I think Ahmed and Hossan can have the damn phone. I'm making these videos. I'm going to take the damn thing off the hook. 1 second. There we go. Anyway, yeah. The whole point of Joker is exactly how he entered the world of supervillaindom. It ends with him as a supervillain. It is an origin myth for the Joker. brought to life. So I don't see what he means here. At some stage, this has to be entered. Why not? Well, why does it have to be entered the way he wants it to be entered? And legend, and what is it? And Ledger was more powerful because he wasn't weighed down with all this realist detail and overblown, ironic noir grandeur. Oh, don't be such a Guardianista poser, you stupid Bradshaw white male. You overblown, ironic. No, it's not overblown. It's there's no irony in it as such. And realist detail. I mean, what's wrong with that? It is a very, it's almost hyper-realist film. That's the point of it. And he wasn't forced to carry an entire story on his own. That's because it was a different film. The whole point is that, this, as I say, it's a simple plot. This is a film about one man. He's the complete central character. Everyone else is peripheral to his life. Everyone else acts simply. Everything everyone else does within the film is done to him. It's kind of like it's peripheral to his own emotions, his own feelings. They essentially act on him. So it's a very solipsistic movie. But it's meant to be. It's about, as I said, it's a simple plot about the mental breakdown of a young man. That's what it's about. This Joker has just one act in him, the first act. The film somehow manages to be desperately serious and very shallow. Well, it is it is more than desperately serious, but shallow? No, it's not shallow. I don't know how you interpret it as shallow at all. Anyway, that's enough of The Guardian. Let's move somewhere else. Right, so let's continue to another. This is a journal I've not actually put into my review before. It's the New Yorker, so I better have a New York accent. So I better start talking a bit like Richard Dolan. So you know when I'm speaking and when I'm reading from the review. So, trailing clouds of controversy. Joaquin Phoenix in the title role invites us to watch his wrongness grow out of control and swell into violence. That's a good summary of the film, certainly. At the beginning of Joker, Arthur Fleck, it's alright. It's just giving us like the beginning, and he says, "We are meant to think of the masks, costumes, and comics as tragic. They were worn by the actors of ancient Greek drama. Over the next couple of hours, these two moods will be welded together until we can't tell the light from the dark." Yeah, that's true. And he talks about Arthur being a clown, would be comic, not funny at all. He does a badly. He does a bomb at the comedy club. Funny, people do laugh at him though, because he makes some joke. He says, "Hey, when I was a kid, I told my school friends I wanted to be a comedian. They laughed at me." Well, you're not laughing now, are you? Yeah, and everyone laughs. Oh right. Yeah. The Year by Mike. Okay, he talks again about the damn year. It's. I'm not going to read all of this, but again, he's putting a date on it is wrong. I think something. And he talks about. Excuse me. And there you have it. Joker is a miserabilist manifesto. Miserabilist, as in miserable. Is that what it is? Oh, he says, "I haven't been a happy one." This is the Joker talking. It's a quote he says several times. "I haven't been happy 1 minute of my entire fucking life." Yeah, it is. It is pretty nasty. It is a nasty thing. The Hangover triptych delighted in the imperishable idiocy of the American male and his stubborn plans to dodge the draft. That's talking about the previous film they make. Arthur Fleck, you might say, represents a nasty new twist on this theme. It is a nasty new twist, definitely. He still shares an apartment with his aging mother, and their relationship is close but tense. Yeah, he washes her. Yeah, he has to bathe her and everything. He's like a carer, like I said, as well as befriending or imagining he's befriended a single mother. Yeah, that's his fake. It's just going into the plot here anyway. And he talks about Arthur's condition. But what condition? Could it be pseudo-bulbar effect, which is a neurological in origin and gives rise to uncontained laughter? Under stress, Arthur certainly breaks into a hyena's cackle, which stops abruptly as it starts. He also weeps, and in close-up we follow the tracks of his tears down his clown's white-painted face. That's true, actually, yeah. He says, "I haven't seen such artful drip since 1971 when Dirk Bogart's hair dye melted with his soul in The Death of Venice." Yeah, This is, oh god, the Death of Venice is a very similar film in a way. It's about a horrible, it's an awful film actually. I mean, not awful. I mean, it's a well-made film, but it's sad. Again, it's centered around one man who is lonely and obsessed, and god, yeah. The film, however, takes no interest in what might be wrong with Arthur. Well, it does actually. It talks very much about what might be wrong with Arthur. It goes into the causes, and it doesn't pull any punches with how the condition, how the conditions around him are the source of his malaise. It doesn't. It doesn't talk about, genetic dice and maybe a neuron went wrong somewhere. It says he is a product of his society and his upbringing. So it does. It takes a great interest in that. It merely invites us to watch his wrongness grow out of control and swell into violence. And proposes a vague connection between that private swelling and the wider social malady. Is it me, or is it just getting crazier out there? Guess what? It's both. Well, that's actually quite perceptive, because that is exactly what it is. It is. It is. Essentially, it's his inner craziness, but also you see it reflected on the outside with the dustman strike, social degradation, and of course the bullying and things that go on. The acceptance of bullying, how it's normalised, how his own boss doesn't stand up for him when he's bullied by these kids. Joker is not plotted so much as crammed with mangy incidents. Like animals, they come in 2 by 2. For example, 2 major scenes take place in public toilets. Yeah, I talked about those, yeah. And he talks about the underground trades as well. More important of all, we get 2 father figures. One is Murray Franklin, and the host of the talk show. Yeah, there is. I mean, you do see like him, like in his fantasies, embraced as a son by, and then of course the Thomas Wayne character as well. Wayne has nothing but scorn for the flecks of the fragmented world. Those who have made us make nothing out of our lives will always look at those who haven't, and we see nothing but clowns. That's where the meme comes from, I think, like the yellow vest thing. Is the clown thing. But that's quite a neat thing, because it shows Bruce Wayne's father as a very heartless man, because he's running for mayor, and he says that. Now, he wants to be mayor of Gotham City. Realistically, you couldn't say that if you're on the campaign trail. Trailing clouds of controversy, Joker descends upon us. The outlined discussion has mounted from the rampant to the manic, undeterred or perhaps exacerbated by the fact that nobody apart from the critics and festival goers have actually seen the movie. Emotions run high when people are low on facts. In one corner, those who crave a masterpiece, a film that will unearth a new psychic intensity in the domain of the comic book. Well, I think it has actually delivered that, if anything. It is unique in that respect. Ideal for our distended times. In the opposite corner are those who fear that Phillips and Phoenix may give license to all the lonely people out there, in particular to any messed up white guys who feel wretchedly uncherished and would welcome a tutorial in the art of lashing out. Now, this is the bit which, of course, the trail of controversy. There were several people on Facebook saying they were going to go into the cinema with a gun and start shooting when the Joker was on. And some people obviously interpret it this way, as a rally, kind of like a cry of freedom for disaffected white guys, lonely white men. As I said, I didn't see that element to it, and I went in there, as with Black Panther, I went into that cinema looking for it. I went into Black Panther looking for cultural Marxism, expecting to find it. I found very little. The same goes for this, because of the letters people wrote me, because of the reviews I'd watched and read by the IDW. I found none. I didn't interpret it that way. I don't think that was its message. So again, I think this may be a misinterpretation, probably paranoia on the part of the left intelligentsia, in the same ways as it may be a misunderstanding or a different interpretation on the part of the IDW. What is agreed upon among those who have seen Joker is the prowess with which Phoenix holds it all together. Yes, as I said, he is the movie. Everyone else is just a peripheral to him. There are no separate supporting characters, I would say. There are just people who relate to him. It's, as I say, it's a solipsistic movie. Yeah, I mean, as I said, he's like and this then talks about his hair and his makeup and things like that, and the fact that his shoulder blades jut out from his skin. I reckon he lost weight actually. I think he did. He must have maybe starved himself for this. The actor Joaquin Phoenix. The trouble is that Phillips, too, as the writer, is in the thrall of his hero, unable to avert his gaze or his camera from the lurid spectacle. That is, I think, the point. Unable to avert your gaze and the camera from the lurid spectacle. It's about him. That's the point. It's a very personal story. Arthur is the main attraction. Yes, he is. No longer is he forced to be part of the scenery. He is the scenery, and such is the strenuous effect of Phoenix's performance that it becomes exhausting to behold. No, it's not exhausting at all. I think it's very well done. Get a load of me, he seems to say, and the load is almost too much to bear. Well, you might think so, this New Yorker reporter, but I thought it was all right. Yeah. I think it's actually... And he talks again about the detectives and the hospital administrator, and he calls them wonderfully weary, like visitors from planet normal. I must admit, they came as a relief. Oh, that's quite witty, actually, I must say. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there, because this is a very long review, and I think I've said enough from the New Yorker now. And I think we now come to another newbie in my roving review. I don't think I've done the BBC before, have I? This is by the BBC. It's Will Gompertz of the BBC. And what sort of BBC voice do I do? I suppose it's like this. You know, tonight's news at 10, like they do on the radio. Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. He gives it 4 out of 5. That's good. Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, a film about Batman's arch enemy. They say people only go to the movies nowadays to see all singing, all dancing multi-million-dollar computer-enhanced Hollywood franchises. They say there's no money to be made anymore with serious, gritty dramas. They say that what the box sets on streaming services are for, the golden days of cinema are over. But they haven't seen Joker, the original story of Batman's arch-enemy, blah-de-blah-de-blah. But the Joker has about as much in common with your typical superhero caper as Wonder Woman has with Dennis the Menace. That's good, isn't it? Dennis the Menace is a character from the Beano. It's funny, I was talking earlier on about British comics and how they compare with American comics. Joker is a Trojan horse, a dark art house film smuggled into the neon-lit world of multiplexes, disguised as a DC Comic Universe action adventure. I don't think disguise is the right word, but yes, it's part of that franchise. Of course, it is a comic book adaptation. It's an origin story for a character from the DC Universe. But it's not disguised, I wouldn't say. A Trojan horse is probably the wrong word. But it is an art house flick, I suppose, and it's not an action adventure. It's an interesting movie by Warner Brothers. The studio knows audience loves thwack pow action sequences. That's what you get with Batman. I mean, you remember the 60s TV series. Beep, bop, beep. They expect witty dialogue and plenty of banter. Well, there's none of that in Joker. I don't know about witty and banter. I think they have that. Instead you have Joaquin Phoenix giving it the full Daniel Day-Lewis slow burn performance of such intensity and weirdness it'll either have an Academy purring to come to the Oscars or shunning it altogether. No. I think he did. I think probably he'll win something. He will win something. Phoenix plays misfit Arthur Fleck, and he talks about his background here. Arthur Fleck, blah blah blah. Oddball in a cruel, intolerant world. Yeah. That's interesting. An oddball in a cruel, intolerant world that doesn't have time to care for vulnerable people. That's very much the message of the film, I think. Is it's a world, if you don't care for vulnerable people, the vulnerable people turn into monsters. And this is why, I'll say more about this later on, but we need kindness. We need to stop blaming the vulnerable for their position when it's not their fault. Or because of who they are abused by others, and it's the people doing the abusing who are to blame, not the people being abused. And that's the point. Kindness, I think, is the point. Is needed. And he talks about it describes Gotham City as a city of unrest and decay, which it was. I mean, Gotham City in some of the Batman movies is quite a glitzy place, but in this one, it's definitely Skid Row. Absolutely. If Arthur was sensible, he'd take an admin job in a library and keep his head down. But Arthur isn't sensible. He's delusional. He's delusional and therefore makes choices that are not good for him or anyone else. He's a chap who wants to put a smile on people's faces, so he becomes a clown for hire and a stand-up comic at night. Yeah. And he talks about... This is not a career advisor on the planet who would have pushed him in that direction. And he talks a bit more about the maniacal darkness behind his eyes, yeah. It's again, he mentions the link between Taxi Driver. Definitely. That's it. The sun never shines in this Gotham City. Everything is downbeat. Class war simmers. The elite live in pampered bubble without a care in the world. There is this kind of like Elysium element to it as well. You see it in the opera house with everything's so clean and the gentlemen are in tuxedos. Joker is a powerful film. It's several galaxies away from the piece of light comic entertainment and cartoon violence and clever sight gags. There are no laughs in this tale about a man who wants to be funny. It's heavy, serious, and at times painfully slow piece. Beckettian almost, but it's not perfect. It is slow paced. It's a longer movie than I thought. I was surprised when I got home and I looked at the time and I realised, because when you're in the cinema, I don't necessarily know how much time is passing when I'm watching the film, especially if it's a good one. But it did feel a long film, and I think it was 2 hours plus. I think it's not perfect. Several of the minor supporting characters are too thinly drawn to allow them to be anything more than types. Yeah, that's kind of a bit like what the New York guy said. And again, this is the supporting characters, not actually supporting characters. That's the point. They are the essentially sounding boards for Arthur. The film is about Arthur. It's a film. He is the film, and the other individuals in it are more. They are essentially peripherals to what he experiences. So they're not character. They're not deep characters who are, in a sense, protagonists of the film. So he's right about what he says here, that the characters are too thinly drawn, but he's wrong to call them supporting characters. They're not. That's not what the film. That's not the point of the film. The violence is bloody and hard to watch, but valid in terms of context and mood. Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's shocking. It is very violent. I'm surprised you got a 15 certificate even in this day and age. Definitely, yeah. But it says, I didn't think Joker was flippant or indulgent, nor do I think it is encouraging or inciting violence. It is reflecting on it, which art is there to do. That's true, actually, yeah, it is true. I've seen a lot of yellow-toothed Jokers in my life, from Cesar Romero to Heath Ledger. They've all brought something to the part and to the character, but none gave him the fragility and psychoses of Joaquin Phoenix's desperate and desperately sad Joker. I think it will become a classic. Yeah, good. It actually gave he gave it a 4 out of 5, which I think is probably what I would give it. So I actually agree with this BBC reporter mostly about this. So I think that's a good review. And finally we go to RT. And of course I do not mean Russia Today, I mean Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes is not actually a critic site itself, it's an aggregator of reviews. So it gives it an overall percentage in terms of favourability or not. And it has two categories, two axes here. There's the tomatometer, which is the critics' voice, and the audience score, which is basically people voting themselves on the website. And as you can see here, there's a discrepancy. Very often you get this discrepancy. We have here the audience score of 90%. The critics say 68%. So the audience are obviously much more favourable of this, the everyday cinema going audience, than the critics. So we have a case. This is one of these cases of people defying the critics. Oh God, I hate that. I'm going to say more about that in a minute, but this defying the critics nonsense. But that's Rotten Tomatoes, so it looks like it's a popular film on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's good. It's doing well. Most of the amateur reviews I've seen are favourable, so probably will agree. Some of them will agree very much with myself on this. So that was the reviews.
So those were the critics talking about the Joker movie. Now, I must say, I can't. Sorry, it's raining now. Oh, it's just getting a bit wet now. It's raining. Can you still see me all right? Yeah. I can't stand these bloody critics. I mean, some of them are all right, like you just heard. Some better than others. But This is one of the reasons I told you I never ever read a review before going to see the film first. And if I'd been planning to go and see Joker, I would not have read a review of it. I wouldn't have watched the videos which I talked about on the intellectual dark web about it either. Because I just can't stand the way these people think they have some God-given authority to have an opinion over everybody else's. What makes a person a critic? Just because they can write well about a particular film, or because they're good writing, good journalistic style? I don't know. Because I don't think that their opinion is any more valid than many other critics. I don't see any of these big mainstream media critics as being any more, their input being any more valuable than, say, Stephen Molyneux or Paul Joseph Watson, even though I disagreed with them as well. I don't know, it's like you have this phrase, you know, defying the critics. Will the cinema going public defy the critics at the box office? What, do the critics have some authority? Do they tell us what we can and can't think? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's insulting. It's an attack against our intellectual integrity. Critics should be people you just read and think it gives you an idea of the film to see what you think of it. It may provoke thoughts in you by reading a review, but on no account should critics be treated with any form of authority. Never. You should never ever say to something, well, so you hear these things saying, well, I wasn't going to see this film, but it's had very good reviews, or no, the critics didn't like it, so I'll give it a miss. No. Then the critics are doing their thinking for you. It's out of order. I just had a few more thoughts actually about that film, which I wanted to share with you. Now, there's a lot left unsaid in the film, and I think or either that or they actually cut out some very violent scenes. I don't know. Mostly around the violence. I've made some more notes. For example, there's a scene where, as I've already told you about the scene where he effectively breaks into his neighbour's flat. He literally goes in there, he just sits there. I mean, he has this, what turns out to be a fantasy about being in a relationship with this woman, a young single mother with a daughter who lives along the road from him. She walks in and she says, "Oh, who are you? It's Arthur, isn't he? He lives down the corridor. What are you doing here? You know, this ain't your flat," and things like that. Now, I forgot to mention that when he turns and looks at her, he repeats the shooting mime, which I told you about earlier from the taxi driver. You know, he repeats it. And I think that indicates, and then it immediately cuts to a shot of him walking out of her apartment down the corridor towards his own. I think that indicates that maybe he killed her. If so, we weren't shown that killing. If it was filmed, it was obviously not put into the feature cut. It was obviously left out, possibly for the sake of brevity, possibly because of it was maybe a bit too hot for the 15 certificate. I don't know. Either we don't get to see it. Either the viewer is left wondering, did he kill her or did he not? Knowing what he's like, knowing the character and having watched the film, I think it's safe to say he may well have actually murdered her when he realised that his lover was just his neighbour who he hardly knew. He may have taken out that frustration on her, because he's not, obviously it's no point blaming her if you have some kind of delusion that you're in love with someone and they're in love with you, and in that way he's like his mother. He's like his mother, fantasizing about a relationship with Thomas Wayne. But I think it looks likely that he killed her. I mean, I felt sorry. I do feel horribly sorry for him. I think he's obviously a violent, man, stripped of all humanity. He's essentially a murderous robot by the end of the film. which of course he is when he comes back into the Batman franchise as his original dark self, with the Tim Burton movies, played by Jack Nicholson and by Heath Ledger. He is completely emotional subhuman, unable to comprehend anything in terms of other people's feelings or their desires or wants. He's a complete psychopath. Indeed, as I said, he won the Psychopath Award in that Psychopath Night documentary, the Heath Ledger portrayal of the Joker. But in a sense, was he born that way? I mean, this goes into the element of psychopaths. I've done an entire programme on psychopaths, and I talked about the psychopaths in my own life, which of course brings me back to the awful memories that I have of my own family past. And appropriately, I'm in a graveyard. This is not the graveyard where my mum is buried, I should point out. I've never been there since she died, and I probably won't go back there. Not since her funeral. But so it's quite apt, really. But in a sense, Professor Kevin Dutton, who studies psychopathy, he's a bit of a knob, really. But he says he describes psychopathy as being like a three-legged stool. There's different elements which come together to create the psychopath, and for him, there are levels of psychopathy. But there's no doubt. I mean, he has. In the very, very first scene of the movie, where he's working as a clown, he's holding a sign up outside a shop for a closing down sale. These thugs nick his sign, and he chases after them down an alleyway, and they kick the crap out of him. And it's like what happens to him on the underground with the three bankers, only it's not as bad. That's much worse what happens to him on the underground. And he ends up like lying there with these 6 or 7 thugs kicking the shit out of him in this alleyway. And of course, if you do that, people who are bullied like that, they often become bullies. Hurt people, as the saying goes, as Joe Lomax was talking about when I had her on my show. And it's in a sense like you do that to somebody. Like, I'd say this to people who, if you see anyone who's continuously picked on by other people, continuously put down, humiliated, and it could be a child at your school, it could be someone in your workplace, it could be a member of your family, you are essentially winding up a spring on a clockwork machine, which is like a killing machine, which they will turn against either others or themselves. When I was at school, I read a poem about an overweight woman who was continuously mocked about her size, and it was called Jilly, and I can't remember the order, but it was like, oh, look at it. She was like performing as a kind of overweight model and like a figure of fun on a circus stage. Look at it wobble, G. Look at her wobble. Look at her waddle. Look at her roll. Look at her roll, Jilly. Look at her roll. And it was like that. That's how the poem went, and it ends with one day Jilly said, I can't remember exactly how the poem goes, but she gets a gun and she puts it to her head and she shoots herself because of this continuous abuse, this continuous emotional abuse. And if you do that to people, that's what will happen. And you may not see it straight away. The person who sits there silently and stoically while other people are abusing them, don't think they're going to do that forever. They won't. That person that has a fuse lit, which has been continuously fanned by this abuse, and sooner or later, when that fuse reaches the charge, the bomb will detonate. It'll detonate in the form of either destruction and or self-destruction. And I think that may be one of the lessons of Joker. You see a man who is incredibly abusive and violent and deranged, destructive, but he himself has been destroyed. The process of his own destruction is very vividly portrayed in this film, and I think that's probably the best element of it. I think that's the most, I say best. Like I said, it is a revolting film. It's a horrifying film, but it's very well made and it delivers a very important message, albeit not the one that some other viewers think it does. So the moral of the story, you could say, is what do we need most in this world? Kindness, as Charlie Chaplin said. We mustn't allow this kind of abuse to go on. We mustn't allow other people to treat us like this. If you see somebody being treated like that, don't just shrug their shoulders and say, oh, it's their fault for being such a wimp or something. Fight for them. Defend them. That, I think, is, if there is a moral to the story of Joker, that's it. So that was my Hapanwo TV roving review of Joker film from 2019. Thank you all for watching. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.